Hi everybody, can you hear me okay? Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so welcome to this discussion today. Can I just double check that everyone is on mute? I think that it needs to include the panelists at the moment as well, just to keep the noise down. Yeah, Kate, you need to be on mute. Sorry, Hannah. Okay.
It's all right. No, it's fine. It's just the...
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. So yes, welcome to today's sustainability in practice discussion. And as Hannah mentioned, it is quite an informal discussion we're going to have today. The three panelists are all doing their own very different sustainability work, and they're going to share with you their experiences. And we're going to have a discussion that hopefully touches on a lot of the themes and topics that came up from the questions that you submitted today. But there might be a bit of time at the end to take some kind of specific questions if you have them. So if anything comes up during the conversation, do pop it in the chat. And we'll be able to take a look at that at the end. But as Hannah said, quite a lot of this is really great information gathering for future events so that things can be a lot more specific and targeted and really get to the heart of the issues that mean a lot to you in your practice at the moment. So today's discussion is going to be just that. It's going to be a gentle, open discussion with three people with varied practices and different experiences, talking about how they think about sustainability in their practice, the steps they're taking to make their practices and businesses more sustainable. And I really hope that that will give you something to consider and think about for your own practice. So just a little bit about me. I know some of you, I've met some of you before, but quite a lot of you are new to me. So I'm just going to give you a very quick introduction to me, and then I'm going to introduce each of the panelists, and then they're going to take over and talk a little bit about each of their own practices, and then we're going to come together for the discussion. So my name's Melody Vaughan. I'm a curator, writer and mentor working specifically with contemporary craft makers, and I have a focus on sustainability and ethical practice within creative careers. Now, my background is in archaeology and museum education, and as a maker who no longer has a making practice. There's not time to talk about that, but it does relate to sustainability. The work I do supporting artists and designers and makers is rooted in a holistic approach to sustainability. I think it's vital that we situate our creative practices and businesses within our lives so that everything is working together and not at odds. And so for me, that means considering sustainability in two ways. There's an internal sustainability, how manageable and maintainable your practice is for you with your own unique needs, priorities, challenges, ambitions, as well as that external sustainability, the impact that your practice has on other people and the planet. And there really is no one size fits all approach to sustainable practice. There will only be paths and actions that make sense for you based on what you're able to manage, what's accessible to you, what you prioritize, and what kind of world you're hoping to create for the future. So through sessions like this, where we gather to have open discussions around the issues, I really hope that people will find inspiration for their own sustainability work, maybe some new perspectives or avenues to explore. I think it's also important to recognise the role that community and peer support plays in this work, sharing information and learning, pooling resources and problem solving, as well as advocacy and collective action. And it's in that spirit that we're here today, not to act as a panel of experts to tell you what to do, but to share experiences, begin discussions and facilitate action. So I'm being joined by three practitioners with varied practices and approaches, and I'm going to introduce them briefly now, and then we will carry on with the discussion. So first up is going to be Georgia Bosson. And Georgia is the creative director of her eponymous design studio, which specialises in crafting considered products and bespoke commissions. Georgia's studio practice spans a direct-to-consumer interiors product range, balanced with large-scale architectural commissions for clients such as Neptune, Assemble, and Studio Weave. And then after Georgia has introduced herself, we'll hear from Kate Lyons-Miller. And ceramic fulfills Kate's interest in three-dimensional design, with added qualities of clay, the age of it, the heft and physicality, the connections between clay and the geology of the landscape. She uses clays and minerals from her region, foraging on Dartmoor and in estuaries and foreshores, for clay and stone, as well as adding other materials to her work. And then finally, we'll hear from Kester Hoefkens. Kester is the workshop and operations manager at Woodlab. Woodlab is a woodwork makers hub set within the woods at Dartington and part of the Woodland Presents, and at its core is the regeneration of the British woodland. So I'm going to hand over to Georgia, and if we could pop her on spotlight, I think that would be great.
Hello, I am Georgia. As Melody already introduced me, I run a design studio. I have a really broad spectrum of kind of practice and how I approach work. So I have a product range which is designed and made in-house, all manufactured in the UK, mostly in London. That is sold mostly direct to customers via my website. I have a few wholesale clients, but I actually steer clear of it for the most part these days. And then I also do bespoke interiors commissioned work for private clients. And then the final prong is that I do kind of large scale architectural interiors work for various studios. All of those things require a different approach to sustainability, and I have different kind of measures of how I approach sustainability, and it is almost on a project by project basis. So I have a set of internal rules that I like to work to, but often, especially with the kind of larger scale stuff, I'm dictated to by circumstance. So when I'm doing my product range, I have complete control and total autonomy. I can choose my materials, I can choose my time scale, I can choose the scale at which I work, I can choose who's making it, and I have all of those things. When I'm working, I've just finished 2 massive projects for Assemble, and in the space of 3 weeks, the studio processed 350 meters of fabric and 8,000 meters of thread. And because of commercial regulations, I wasn't able to dictate hopefully kind of the material quality and the material quantities that we were going through. So it's about finding a balance for me, and I'm definitely still learning. It was a real challenge to figure out and kind of reconcile the volume of cloth that we were working with and kind of the projected outcome and kind of how long these products are going to be in use, but equally we have to make money. So it is for me about balancing sustainability issues with financial balancing. And one of the main things that I focus on is the kind of humanity of my supply chain. For me, I always wanted, when I first started my business, there was like a headline, someone would call it a business plan. It was literally a sentence, and I wanted to make things that did good things on their way into the world. It doesn't even really read that well as a sentence, but I know what it means. And essentially, I want to make sure that the products that I choose to make and that I choose to add to a world that have a lot of products are giving someone else an opportunity whilst they're being manufactured. You know, I make high-end luxury product. They're not for everyone, but if I can kind of do something with that manufacturing process that means that as they are making their way into the world, I've improved someone's lives, then that's kind of feels good to me. And for me, that is a big part of what I would term sustainability, which isn't maybe how a lot of people approach it. A lot of people go materiality and waste reduction, which I do, but for me, the human element is a big factor. So I work with social enterprises for my production. I work with a prison who have a program internally where it's actually only women in this program. So we'll go with the female prisoners all get paid for the work that they do. And whilst they are making the commercial product, they also get a qualification that enables them to get work once they've completed their time in prison. The program has just expanded to also include a post-prison work unit. So once you've been released, you are offered an opportunity to go and have a job in that unit, following on with the same clients. They work with people like Bethany Williams, who is a sustainable fashion designer, currently has a show at the Design Museum, if anyone wants to go see it. And then smaller people like me, where, you know, I'll do a production run of 100 units, but then they'll go up to 10,000 units. And then I also work with a another employment charity who run a factory in North London. So both of those things for me are like very much the core of what I do. And I set a timer and I've just hit 5 minutes. So I think I'm going to stop there. I could go on forever, but I'm not going to. I'm going to hand over to someone else.
Fantastic, Georgia. Thank you. Okay, Kate, are you happy to speak now?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I think one of the most sustainable things that I do as a ceramicist is teach. I think that passing on the skills and knowledge that I've accumulated is vital, and that showing people two really important things. One is that clay is around us, under our feet in many places, and the materials we use in ceramics can be found. You don't have to buy everything from shops and suppliers in Stoke-on-Trent and so forth. And the other is more and more that you don't necessarily have to fire everything you make. More and more people, Phoebe Cummings notably, are making works which are unfired and have a limited life, and concentrating on the process of making rather than the finished product, because we have so much stuff in the world already. Do we actually need masses more? However, people enjoy beautiful things. So if you're teaching, you're giving them an opportunity to create their own, and also enjoy the process, understand the process, and better understand the things that they like when they see them in galleries and shops and so forth. So it all ties together. Talking about sustainability in ceramics is difficult, and I'm not an expert. I'm enthusiastic, but materials, clays. I tend to use locally sourced clays where I can, and I'm very fortunate that I live here in Devon, where I have Bovey ball clay on my doorstep, and just to the other side of Dartmoor, the china clays of Leamore and Cornwall, and I often combine the two. I think it's important to, if you're digging clays, which you can find all over the place, you must ask permission from the landowners. I've heard of people just going out and digging. It's going to, if it happens too much, it's going to spoil the whole thing for everybody, because there's going to be a kickback against it. You have to take care of the environment in which you're digging. If you find clay on a riverbank, for instance, there are times of year when you don't want to disturb that riverbank, because it'll be full of larvae and eggs of insects and possibly fish down in the bottom of the river. So think about those kind of things. Think about if you're buying clay from suppliers, using powder clay, so that you're not paying for the transportation of water. It requires you to make up the clay yourself and wedge it and so forth, and that is hard, but could be a good idea. So looking after yourself is important. A bit of care about manual handling, because a broken body is not a sustainable thing either. And all the clay that you use in the studio can be reclaimed. It's I don't think anybody does it anymore, but there was a time when people just used to chuck clay in the bin and that was it, and they'd go out and buy another bag of it. We use a lot of colorants in ceramics, and there are ethical concerns around products such as cobalt. A lot of the cobalt used in the West comes from the Congo. Artisanal mining in appalling conditions is common in the Congo. I understand that there are other places in Africa where mining is more heavily regulated. I have asked my suppliers where their products come from and haven't got a good answer. I've been told, for instance, Belgium, but we know that Belgium gets it probably from the Congo. Whether it's bought from artisanal sources or someone like Rio Tinto Zinc, we just don't know. But perhaps we could look at alternatives. Perhaps we don't have to use those products. I've done a bit of that, and I've been directed towards the site of a mine somewhere in Devon where there was cobalt. but a little bit of research indicated that there was also pitch blende on this site, and pitch blende is a radioactive material, and I don't know enough to go messing around with that. Which leads me on to spoil heaps. Looking on spoil heaps of old mines with landowner permission is a good way to try and find some of the colorants that we might use. Iron oxide, manganese, hematite. Again, personal safety is a consideration. Look after yourself, know what you're doing, know where shafts and so on are likely to be. Tell someone you're there, take someone with you. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was firing. Firing uses masses of energy, and I know that many of us are trying hard to minimize that. Single firing seems to me to be a very desirable thing to do. And the jury seems to be out on whether if you're glazing, you single fire at leather hard or bone dry. And I think the only thing that we can do is to test. So it seems that some glaze respond well to being glazed at leather hard and some at bone dry, and the other way around. The trouble is that when you're glazing something that's bone dry, you're rehydrating it and it can just collapse in your hands. So, but it's rewarding. And another thing about single firing is that you're still very much in touch with the piece that you've made, and you know what you were thinking about when you made it and how you wanted it to look. Whereas if you wait and you bisfire it and then a week or so later, or 2 or 3 weeks later, it comes out of the kiln, you have that kind of, oh, what was I going to do with this? That's and also I'm testing and experimenting with low temperatures. There's an alarm. I could a bit like Giorgio, I could carry on all day. But I prepared a small bibliography which Hannah will send out to anyone who's interested. There is a lot of writing and more all the time on these subjects.
Fantastic, that's great, Kate, thank you. Okay, and then lastly, we're just going to hear briefly from Kester. Yes.
Hello, good morning. So Woodlab is a makerspace, a woodworkers makerspace in Dartington. We're part of a company called the Woodland Presents, which has been going for a few years now. And the Woodland Presents is, as it says on the tin, really, it's our attempt at showing everything that the woodland can provide in terms of economic, environmental and sort of social benefits to people. So at our core, all our decisions, the first part of any decision process is the welfare of the woodland. So we basically come from a sustainable background, where we try and it's all about the regeneration of our woodland. And then to go into separating ourselves slightly from the Woodland Presents and looking directly at Woodlab, which the sort of impacts that we are having. So we have our environmental impact, we have our social impact. In terms of environmental, very sort of quickly glossing over lots of other parts that I could witter on about. I would say about 80% of the timber we used is locally sourced. We are trying to attempt to reduce our wastage. So that involves developing small products that are from our offcuts and things like that. We are having an ongoing battle to try and figure out what we do with all our sawdust, which is probably only our real proper waste product. And it costs quite a lot for it to be removed, and most facilities won't take it because we can't guarantee that our sawdust is dry We can't guarantee that it might not have sucked up a screw or a nail, or that it might contain sheet material like MDF or plywood. It means that it's where normally you'd be able to find a local farmer that would take it. They're quite reluctant to take it from that side. So our latest sort of endeavour in that is to look at creating like briquettes, sawdust briquettes for burning, but that costs a lot of money. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to fund that side of it. The timber that we do use, other than it being locally sourced, we try and take what the woodland wants to give us rather than what we want from it. So that means at the moment we're getting a lot of ash coming through because of the ash dieback. And usually that would be diverted over to firewood and wood pulp. And we're trying to sort of take as much of that as we can possibly take to create things from. So rather than going into the woodlands and finding that a client wants something made out of oak and picking that oak and having it felled and dried, we're trying to actually go through and like what needs to come out of that woodland to keep it healthy. So they're the trees that we are trying to use. As a larger company, we have a lot of tree planting that's going on. We have 12 acres of existing woodlands that is continually being managed, so trees coming out, trees being planted. We have a further 12 acres of what is currently pasture that is in the process of being planted up. One of the schemes that will be planted up as will be an agroforestry, so a lot of sort of nut trees and other sort of crops sort of growing in and around it. So we're really sort of keen on our woodland management. So going back to the Woodland Presents, one of the offshoots of the Woodland Presents is a series called Tree Radicals, which is an invitation to explore woodland management. Currently there is a set of podcasts up with interviews with people like Isabella Tree, who wrote the Rewilding book, Seb Cox, who's at the forefront of sort of sustainable furniture, experts in biodiversity and microfauna, tree management people. So yeah, a whole host of minds, and that's just the start of our sort of exploration into what British woodlands should become. And then the other side of us is our social impact. So we are a not-for-profit community interest company. So as a wood hub, we have our membership of people coming and they can use our machinery, become part of a larger sort of wood folk network. We offer upskilling. We host a series of events where we invite our members to come and present their work to the public. We have, it's a big sort of social get together, really, an excuse for a knees up. We run, or we're just about to start running woodwork courses that will be launched this coming June. So coming from beginners through to a sort of advanced courses. And I'm trying to think what else. I mean, there's so much more will come out during the course of this conversation, but yeah, I think I can probably wrap up there.
Fantastic, thank you. That's great. Okay, so Hannah, is it possible to pop us all on the spotlight so that anyone watching in speaker view will see all of us? Looking good. Great. Hopefully everyone can see the four of us in one go. Can you? Brilliant. Wonderful. Okay, so I have some topics and themes that seemed to have a consensus with some of the questions that people had submitted beforehand, and we will get into those. But something that I really wanted to just pull out of what was said by the three of you just there is this sense of maybe widening our definition of what sustainability means within creative practice and within creative careers. Because although I don't think we can deny that energy reduction and our, uncoupling from our reliance on fossil fuels is obviously a really important thing everyone needs to be doing, but sustainability as a term can mean so much. And I think that by hearing people talking about what that means to them and how teaching is a sustainable practice, how social enterprise is a sustainable practice, thinking about who makes the things as well as how they're made and what they're made out of. And so I was just wondering, is there something we can begin with about how do we, how do people figure out that? How do we figure out what's ours to do in this work? Because I think it's really tempting to feel like you've got to tackle all of it, that that there are so many aspects to your work that could have attention. But I get the sense that finding those bits that mean the most and seem most relevant to you and your work might be more successful than trying to figure out all of it and trying to fix everything. And I was just wondering how you felt about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, interestingly, when it was 10 years ago that I made that decision to work with people that I felt were doing good things. And I made the decision that if I was going to make product, which when we're talking about personal sustainability, it's something I can't not do. Like you can see behind me, there's just stuff, and I draw all the time and I make all the time, and I can't deny that part of myself. And I've been through many ups and downs of that being something that I feel guilty about, and I sort of had to decide to have some sort of personal ownership about the fact that that's who I am. So what can I do with that and the agency that I have, and can I advocate for people that can't advocate, and can I do really great stuff rather than just making another cushion? Can that cushion be better? And for me, that is a way to access and kind of make peace with the fact that I am someone that makes stuff. And it's not about excusing it, and it's not about not challenging at every turn why it's being made and where its purpose is, but it's kind of, if you've made that choice, then it's a nice way to live with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think because a lot of the things that we might make could be seen as luxury goods and therefore unavailable to people who don't have spare cash. If we can teach in whatever settings, we can at least promulgate the enjoyment of the things. Somebody can come and do a session, hopefully for not too much money, and have a sense of owning or making beautiful things without having to shell out hundreds of pounds. Mm-hmm. I find in almost every teaching session I run in my studio, somebody will say, "Oh, this is so therapeutic." And that's just great, because just the process of creating something with your hands is wonderful. Sometimes there's a lot of chat in the studio. Sometimes it goes very quiet and people are just getting on. And this is all good. It's good for mental health. It's good for connectivity. We made everyone stop.
You might have frozen.
Yeah, I think Melody is frozen. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because of the way that our company sort of came into being as being set up as a not-for-profit community interest project, the decisions that we make are, yeah, they're tough decisions, but we're kind of led down that path before we start to investigate how we're going to become sustainable. So we start from the sustainable, from the regenerative side, and then look at ways of how we can present that. So yeah, we've highlighted that we have to have an environmental impact, we have to have a social impact, and hopefully an economical impact. And I think as woodworkers, we are probably more inclined to be sustainable. It's certainly easier to be sustainable. You can make quite quick, easy decisions. So just by saying that you will use British native timber, you're suddenly doing a huge amount to be sort of like environmentally sustainable. And there's still a lot more to do. And I think that's something that I'm sort of uncovering, is whilst we are a very green company, there's a hell of a lot of stuff we're still not doing. And the more I sort of look into sustainability, the more I realise that there is more to do.
I think, I don't know if you mentioned Seb Cox earlier, but I heard him speaking the other day and he was talking about how the news, I feel like this was a question I read, is someone asked what the, like what we should be aiming to achieve, like what's the gold standard in sustainability? And he was talking about the fact that your practice should be regenerative. And I was like, oh gosh, yes, like the goalposts have moved. And actually, I mean, in terms of textiles, regenerative is complicated and something that I certainly don't know that I will reach. But for me, I think single fiber use is a really good way to start, because it means that it can be reprocessed. Whereas the minute you start multi-weaving and multi-mixing fibers, it becomes much harder to do something with that at the end of your product's lifespan. I guess the same with timber, like the minute you make plywood, kind of changed how you finish its life.
Yeah, there's a whole host of terms that seem to come from big corporates, so that the carbon offset is coined by BP or somebody like that, and there's definitely this shift in goalposts where I think in terms of environmental sustainability, there's this whole idea that somebody who's catching a flight to go to COP26, they're fine if they plant lots of trees and they offset their carbon footprint. And yeah, but that goalpost is obviously so old, and it's so sort of like it's just, yeah, there's so much more to do. So it's looking at obviously how you can reduce your carbon footprint, but it's wanting to actually put a proper positive. But yeah, as you say, like it's the regenerative side of it. Like what can you do to actually make sure that the future of your craft can carry on? And it's there's a lot to come. I think it's what gets me more excited now, I think, more than actually doing the woodwork.
Okay, I have to apologise to everybody. My signal seems to be incredibly bad today. So if I get lost again, I might have to relocate to another room and hope that the builders next door aren't being too noisy today. So I'm sorry I completely missed all of that, but it sounds like things continued. So I'm just wondering if I pick up with a question that came through. I don't know if this has been covered. If it has, just let me know and we'll move on. But a question that came through before the event from one of the participants was about kind of a relationship, or maybe a tension, perceived tension between sustainability and creativity and problem solving. And I think I've got the question here. What was it? It said, sustainability has often been framed as a kind of restriction on creativity. Was sustainable practice a challenge for you, or rather a restriction that bred innovation and creativity? And I'm just wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about this aspect, this more kind of if you have sustainability as part of your practice and you're thinking about it, it feels to me that naturally that's going to lead to creative problem solving, that rather than feeling like limits of things you can't do, it opens up a whole possibility of things you could do. And I'm just wondering, have you found that, the three of you, in aspects of your work or in things that you've been researching? And so is there a tension between sustainability and creativity, or is there a relationship? Is there something interesting happening there? Kate?
I don't think that there is. I think it's about the will of the maker. It comes down to ethics. If you want to continue to work in materials that are sourced from overseas, and you want to multiple high fire many times in your electric kiln, then you have to live with that choice. If you don't, and you want to try and find other ways, I think that you should celebrate the fact that you're a creative person, and the problems that you're going to engage with will lead to amazing new solutions, or not. Lots of failures. We have to accept the failures on the way. But I think that that's to call it a restraint is to be backward looking, if you don't mind me saying so.
Yeah, I think it's rather than it being a tension between creativity and sustainability, it's probably more sustainability and finance. And that if you have a set product that hasn't had a particularly sustainable life, and that is something that's already been developed, and it may be a product that's going out to the same person, and you've got that set price range. Bringing in sustainability, usually the first parts of sustainability will come at a cost, and hopefully over time that cost will be reduced and hopefully saving money. But a lot of the things that you can apply to your creative industry will have a sudden impact on your finance. And it's if you have taking on clients that, like, you know, I've done projects before where I've had to make things out of macassar ebony, and I've done my very best to talk the client out of it, and I've shown them you know, sort of different timbers that aren't as dubious, and even sort of like man-made timber that's made to look like a macassar ebony, and they just wanted it as the status symbol of having a piece like that. And I would have dearly have loved to have said, no, I'm not going to make it, find somebody else. But I couldn't. You know, I had to take that money. And there's been, yeah, I've done big corporate jobs for clients I just don't like. You know, I've fitted out people like Primark's offices, and you know, I'm not happy about it, but it's unfortunately a financial sort of decision. And I think particularly for younger companies that are starting out, who kind of will take anyone that offers them money to you know, see them through, it can be a very difficult time to try and become sustainable. But then at the same time, if you set your standards and you are trying to educate your clients and your customers as much as you can, hopefully then the right clients are more attracted to you. So yeah, at Woodlab, Woodland Presents has been existing for a while. Woodlab is a, you know, sub 2-year sort of company as a workshop. And we've got a definite set of sustainable goals that we are trying to achieve. And we are, yeah, very good at blunt sort of refusing to do the work that doesn't fit in with our ethos and our ethics. But yeah, it definitely hasn't impinged on our creativity. In a way, it's actually set us up with more challenges, like how to be more creative. So going back to something like the ash dieback comes with its own set of problems in that structurally it's not as sound as your average sort of unaffected ash tree. Parts of it are almost unusable in that it's got ingrown bark and faults, and it affects the strength of the timber. So our challenge, creativity, is to work out what we're going to do with it. So it's set up an extra creative sort of project for us.
It sounds to me then that there has to be an acknowledgement that maybe sustainable work has to be responsive rather than just reactive. So it's not just taking on this thing, oh, we need to fix this. This is the thing that's wrong with the way these materials are produced or these techniques I use, and what can I do to fix it? But actually acknowledging that throughout the course of making changes and looking at things that come out of that, or like you said, allowing, you know, certain things to come into existence, you then have to respond to that new thing. And so it becomes a lot more responsive and adaptive. It's not quite so rigid. It has to be more flexible, which I think can be freeing and liberating for a lot of people, but can also be really frightening if you've been working in certain ways for a long time. And so I think first, for me, I think we have to be really mindful of that within some practices, especially quite a lot of very traditional crafts that have always been done a certain way in certain processes with certain materials, making those changes is a big shift in mindset, as well as, you know, dealing with the kind of practical aspects. And also the financial implications are huge for a lot of people. And so, you know, like Georgia said at the beginning, there's this balance, and that balance has to be for you personally, I feel. I'm not here to tell people where that balance works for them in their practice and where that line is. But yes, I think hearing what you're saying there, you know, the things it opens up are more possibilities, more challenges. And I wonder, do you find that, Georgia? Have you, in your practice?
Yeah, there are so many ways I could talk about this, but I'm just in kind of the commercial terms, like the money I get in from big jobs where I have less control, I can invest in materials that I have a belief in, and kind of it is complicated for sure, but whilst there are fire regs on textiles in buildings, and those fire regs are set by someone so far removed from me and where I'm working, I have to exist within that structure. It's not something I'm going to personally be able to change. What I can do is work with things like wool, which have a natural inbuilt fire retardancy, and some places accept it, some do not, some require extra coating. There's stuff like that, you know, there is a balance between how you make your money and how you have your own creative practice. And I guess in an ideal world, I'd just sit in a room and make things from found material, but actually commercially, I need to be able to offer consistency across my product range. The way my business is set up will probably change. I'm very open to kind of movement, and I'm not set in my ways. And if someone comes to me and offers me a better way of doing things, then I'm totally up for doing it. But I'm doing a project at the moment with Neptune, and working with the waste from their stores. So that is in itself a design challenge, and it's working with someone else's waste, but it's still kind of opening up that conversation and saying like, hey guys, you were throwing this in a bin 6 months ago, let's add value. And I think for me, it's always about whatever your waste material is. Oh my God, there's someone at the door to collect a, but anyway, whatever your waste material is, if you can add value to it, then that's a really good thing. I have to go and get a courier. I will be back. Please talk without me.
I think that's a really interesting segue into, Kate, sorry, were you going to say something?
I just wanted to say about, you were talking about traditional crafts and some people finding it perhaps challenging to give up ways of working. When I've been working with children and introducing the idea of unfired ceramics, I was at first a little worried that they were going to be concerned that they weren't going to take something home to mum and so on. But children, unlike adults or some adults, are absolutely fine with it. Totally get that it's a process of making that's the joy, and the reclaiming the clay for the next project is something that I found children and young people to be completely at home with, which is great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, message is getting through. And not to say that we don't need to make and have beautiful things too, but children are very receptive.
And I think that speaks to something that I just saw in one of the comments about educating clients and customers. And of course, teaching is this direct education, but I think we need to not forget how we are ourselves educating everyone we come into contact with when we are doing our work, whether it's directly for selling or whether it's, you know, with suppliers, with audiences on social media. You know, it's all an opportunity to be talking about these things that you care about, the issues, even if you don't have the answers. Just saying to people there are options. You don't have to do it this way, or my work is more expensive because I am choosing to do it this way. So the value is in that. Are you willing to pay for that? Do you value that too? And if you don't, what are other ways that we can work together? Or is this just not a product that's for you? And it feels to me like that aspect of education and advocacy and having it be not just an internal thing that we do within our practices, but we talk about it so that other people understand everything that goes into it, can help you navigate some of those trickier times, maybe.
Yeah, we're doing a lot with we've just taken on our commissioning process, and we're just about to launch like an e-shop with products and things like that on. And part of the literature that goes with that is why do we cost what we cost? And, you know, we're breaking down our transparency. So it's, you know, like the value of the timbers, the value of the labour, you know, even like how much we get taxed on the product, so that the client or someone can actually see that and go, right, I'm actually only paying the makers a tiny slither of that. All the rest is going back into making sure that the regenerative process, you know, our rent and rates and all that kind of thing. And sustainability sort of fits in there as well. It's like, you know, we charge this amount because we have to be sustainable. And yeah, the education and as you're saying, like it's why does the client want something in particular? Is it actually an informed decision, or is it just they've seen something like that somewhere else? So the easiest thing for them to do is ask for that similar thing. So yeah, it's an education of why you've chosen that material, and you know, like giving them options as an alternative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely something that post my busiest month of my life, I'm kind of starting to look at is like when a client comes to me next time with a 3-week lead and needing 350 meters of fabric process, I'd like to have something in place to show them their options of slowing down or spending a bit more money on their materials. And I would like to do the plan is to do a kind of internal audit of what could I personally have done better. I think in the circumstance I've just had, there was nothing I could have done. But going forward, if that situation ever arose again, I'd really like to have the tools at my disposal to be like, hey, if you give me 6 more weeks, we can manufacture with these people that you can then have this social impact. And also if we use this material, which takes 3 more weeks and costs this much more money, you can then do it. So I think for me, commercially, that's the next move, is to like, it's about education, but it's education in a less direct way. It's not kind of a traditional classroom situation, but it's offering out, okay, you've got your sustainability values, I've got mine. Where are we going to meet in the middle? How are we going to do this? But have to go through the the absolute madness of a project like that to come out the back and go, oh right, yeah, this is what these are the conversations I should have had and wished I could have had with 10 more minutes in a day. So yeah, that's all about learning on all sides.
Yeah. And that's it, isn't it? It's this iterative process. Sustainability isn't a checklist of things that you do for your practice or business. You tick them off and yay, you're sustainable. It's every project, every body of work, every exhibition, reassessing what are your needs, what are the needs of the people you're working with, what are the things that you care about, what are those values underpinning it, how do you balance all of that out, and the economics of it all, how do you balance all of that out to be the best it could be at that point, and then do that again and again, because things change and it's not a fixed kind of entity. Now, I'm really aware that we're kind of right on the end of the session, and I don't want to keep people too much longer. So I was just wondering, Georgia, actually, you kind of answered my final question to you as a group, which is kind of what are you thinking about next? Because it's an ongoing process building sustainability into a practice or a business. And so I was just wondering, what are the challenges that you're currently facing? Or maybe what are the issues that you're currently kind of really engaged with, maybe in research or thinking? What's that kind of next step for each of you with your sustainability work?
Should I finish off my previous thought? Basically, it's a bit more auditing, and it's finding a way to take a bit more time within my business to make sure that's happening and it doesn't get pushed to the bottom of the pile. I think that means hiring someone, which is a big step, because as a single person doing something like this, you deal with all the firefighting, you deal with the day-to-day, and then if you're lucky you do your design work, and then where does the audit come in? So I think probably hiring someone is the most sustainable option for my future, like personal wellness and the improving. There is only so much you can do in one day, and I think if I work with someone else and start working with collectives of people to share that information, that will definitely help. Just kind of keep going. I mean, I read a lot of books. I just read one that actually Mel and I were discussing the other day called Vaughan, and it's a people's history of clothing, and it was completely eye-opening about the kind of global interconnectivity of the textile supply chain and the kind of the human hand. And I mean, one of the most interesting things that came from it for me was that nobody, no matter how much money they throw at it, can figure out how to function a sewing machine without a human. They can't do it. So it's about kind of thinking about those humans throughout the supply chain, and it's just a very interesting like twists and turns of political funding throughout textiles and fabric, and would highly recommend if anyone's up for some further reading and into textiles and stuff.
Kate, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I am writing as an adjunct to my teaching, because I'm learning stuff and I'm keen to pass it on. So yeah, I can't teach bigger groups than I do. I can't put many more hours than I do into that, because I'm also making, but yeah, I'm finding a way to get another 5 or 6 hours in every day would be great. Difficult. But I prepared a bibliography which Hannah's going to send out, but on it is a book called The Joyful Environmentalist by Isabel Losada. And that's great, because sometimes we can beat ourselves up with all of this. And I found it an easy read and a positive read, so highly recommend that.
Great, fantastic. Thank you for making that recommendation. Okay, Kess, just to wrap up.
Yeah, so to wrap up, I mean, we're looking at our sort of next steps. So we are looking at getting our audit, our environmental audit done, our carbon footprint worked out, and helping out with that with the Low Carbon Devon Future Shift internship. So we've got a young girl joining us at the start of next month, who's going to be with us for 3 months. basically trying to help us in our sort of search to be more sustainable. Some of the projects that we've sort of identified that we need to look at is we have a huge roof here, and we also have a lot of electricity being used. So we're looking at some point, you know, this could be something that happens 10 years down the line, but we are looking at having solar panels installed, and there's a workshop next door to us as well that has probably twice as large roof that we do. So that should generate more electricity than we can use. So it's then offering what isn't used to the local community. Another part of that is, as I was saying before, we're looking at getting a sawdust briquette maker to deal with our waste. We're looking at funding for that, whether that comes from, again, the local community or some sort of grant. And the output from that, we are looking to sort of link up with sort of local charities and councils so that briquettes that can go into log burners and things can actually be supplied to low-income households. So yeah, there's several sort of parts around that we're sort of looking at, you know, our next steps as a company. But outside of that, I'm finding that the most sort of, I mean, I love the title of this book you just mentioned, The Joyful Environmentalist. It's a conversation, it's a network to sort of be had, like this sort of event. It's linking up with other creatives, whether they're in your field or not. But all the time that you have to invest in discovering what sustainability that you can put into your company, there's obviously a value on that. It costs money to do that. It takes you out of your creative practice, you know, sitting in front of a potter's wheel, planing up a bit of timber, whatever it is, and you have to put time into it. So if that time can be shared amongst a group of peers, signing up to things like the Green Maker, a pub chat, you know, there's so many little sparking ideas that people have, and I think that's really important, and yeah, it can be quite exciting, really.
Great, thank you, Kes. Sorry, Fee, were you holding up a book just there? I'm afraid you're on mute, so we can't hear you, but oh, it's the book that you were just mentioning, Kate.
Yeah, it's just the book that was mentioned. It is very good.
Wonderful. And actually, that point you were just making there, Kes, I think is a really great place for us to kind of wrap this up and end, which is, you know, someone in the chat said, how do we get more people having these conversations? And obviously, there's a certain amount of these are conversations that lots of people are having with themselves or maybe with one other person, but how are we kind of building up to kind of coordinating more, making those links? Because this sustainability work isn't a thing that you should be starting at the absolute beginning and feeling like you personally have to figure it all out and build up your knowledge in a very linear way. There are already great work going on in lots of different aspects, not just within, you know, the creative industries, but, you know, in other industries, and kind of hearing from those might not give you a direct solution to your problem, but it gives you maybe a different way of framing it, or understanding that, you know, maybe in 5 years' time, there might be some new technology in this area that actually might have an impact on our sector. And so it's this kind of coordinated connectivity that's so vital in these conversations. And I think that's also the value of green initiatives like the Green Maker initiative that Make Southwest are building here, but also there are these initiatives happening in other parts of the country, in other disciplines. Jewelers have their own. You know, go to those events, connect with people there, you know, ask people that you make with, if you share a studio with people, you know, could we have a chat about this? If you teach, especially if you teach at further or higher education, I still don't understand why sustainability is not baked in. You know, why are people who are leaving with degrees not actually being asked to think critically about their practice, about their design process? So wherever you are in spaces, you know, these are the conversations we need to be having. I mean, it's vital. We're running out of time to actually make some really good work in a lot of areas, and we need to be doing more. So I'd like to thank Make Southwest for hosting this event, and for it being part of that Green Maker Initiative. So if you're not already a member of the Green Maker Initiative, I definitely recommend that you sign up, because there'll be more events like this. You'll be accessing a network of people who may have fantastic insights and solutions, or even just that camaraderie of knowing there are other people out there doing it with you. So I'm just wondering whether, Hannah, was there anything that you wanted to add? Yes, there's not at all an issue with that, but I think my experience of teaching at other higher education establishments is that it is an issue still. But yes, University of Plymouth, although yeah, I can't speak from personal experience there. Hannah, would you like to just
Sure thing. I'm going to talk through Kate's microphone, but you should hopefully see me somewhere on the screen. Yes, thank you very much for attending. There's been some really nice activity in the chat. Any of the kind of key points I'll make sure are circulated to the panelists afterwards. Yeah, like I said at the beginning, kind of everything, all those kind of chats that you've done in the registration and in the chat today has really helped me think about where we go next with the Green Maker Initiative, and kind of what different subgroups or other different online chats we can start putting on for you guys. So watch this space, and I will be in contact shortly. And yeah, thank you again to all the panelists and for Melody joining us here today. It's been really interesting. I've learned a lot, and yeah, thank you very much.